If you guys sort of keep up with me, you recall me saying that I did not know anime was its own subsection of televised media. I always thought it was just a different style of cartoon, and by that time, I've already watched tons of anime. I've watched things like Yu Yu Hakusho, Rave Master, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and so forth. When the internet started to become more of a thing for me, and YouTube was getting more popular, it kinda became the place where I'd watch these shows called anime. It would be segmented into 3 parts, being 144p, and most times if not, be subtitled in Spanish. This was before these animated dedicated websites were a thing like Crunchyroll and so forth, and I was desperate to find a way to get my fill. And that very first anime that I watched this way was Ouran High School Host Club. I wasn't kidding when I said I was desperate, but right after that, I got introduced to Soul Eater, and I was able to see the first episode and go from there, which is something very substantial for me since I would usually be in the middle of an arc when watching anime on TV. When I started Soul Eater, the art design, the world building, and that damn amazing opening sucked me in. Everything seemed a bit surreal, like I thought this may have been the anime adaptation for A Nightmare Before Christmas. Everything had this Halloween aesthetic, and it seemed more cartoonish than anime at certain times, as well as due to the art style, which leads me to Atsushi Okubo, the writer and illustrator for works such as Soul Eater and Fire Force. Atsushi Ohkubo is a manga artist that actually started out as an assistant before going on to tackle his first independent work, being Be Ichi, which had a short run of 4 volumes, but right after that he would start Soul Eater, which became a worldwide success, and after that he quickly did this crap, and currently he's working on Fire Force. As usual, I'm going to take a look at his inked work and then his color work, and considering the flexibility in his art style, I have a lot to talk about. Okay, I'm gonna get this out of the way very quickly, but I think it's safe to say that his art style at the beginning of his artistic career was a bit wonky. It's not too much of a big deal since this is the overall basis to his art, which I'll explain later, but you could definitely see the disparity between Soul and Maka's design from the beginning of Soul Eater towards the end. However, he uses his wonky art style to really bring out a wide range of expressions. You'll have characters grinning from ear to ear or contort their eyes in very extreme ways, like in Corona's case. And speaking of eyes, you sometimes have motifs that carry on between characters. For example, certain characters will have particular designs for their eyes. Hibana will have a 4-leafed clover design, Benimaru will have an X and O design, and Arrow will have an arrow design. Going back to how he contorts the character's expressions, he also extends this to the proportions and sometimes shifts his entire art style. For example, one scene that I absolutely love in Fire Force is when the main cast of characters go through a wasteland filled with intense concentrations of gas, and they all straight up get high. And he doesn't solely express this in their speech, but also in how he draws them as well. He could go very geometric with his art, and it reaches graphic design levels. He'll make the characters lanky with very thin joints, and on top of that he adds a bit of surrealism, and for lack of a better description, sometimes his artwork can be described as loud. One thing in particular that I always notice in his inked work is the way he draws noses. Usually, typical manga noses are just a simplified reduction of what normal noses are, and thus are usually drawn in this type of way. However, Okubo draws the contour of shadow that usually appears right beneath the nose. I guess this is something minor, but I honestly don't see any other manga artists do this, so I thought it'd be something cool to point out. It's a simplification that conveys what it is really well. And some people may think that due to his seemingly simple art style that he can't do intricate details, but that is definitely not the case. And you can see that in all of his fight scenes and splash pages. The details he puts in the collateral damage and debris is absolutely insane, and this may be a given, but he renders the fire in Fire Force so well. I mentioned this back in my video talking about Kazue Kato, but the way to draw flames is usually through hatching lines and contrast. That, along with his intricate details in the destruction, you can really feel the erratic nature of fire. However, if he so chooses to, he can switch to his geometric and graphic art style and give the flames a sort of design aspect to it. This really displays the fact that Okubo really owns this art style. It's malleable to fit any sort of situation or vibe, and he just continues to build on top of this since all the way back from the beginning of Soul Eater. Also, he's one of the few artists who draws black people really well. As a black guy myself, I really appreciate that. Killick, Sid, Naigus, Ogun, they're all really good examples of black characters that aren't drawn in a derogatory and stereotypical way. They actually got black hair and aren't just dark-skinned anime people. Moving away from character-centered art, establishing shots are something that is sort of a staple in the comic book industry. It gives the reader an idea of where the current scene is taking place or introduces the reader to a major location, and Okubo creates such unique worlds for the readers to get immersed in. The main setting for Soul Eater is Death City, and it takes place in Nevada. Therefore, you're definitely not going to see too many Eastern Asian aesthetics outside from story beats that focus on Tsubaki and Black Star. Also, that's the reason why most of the characters' names are pretty Western. Plus, the Halloween, Tim Burton vibes are blended so well. The moon and sun are always cackling in the background, but they're somehow not out of place in this type of world since everything else was built up very well. Fire Force, however, does take place in Japan. However, based on an interview he had, he wanted to mix the Meiji, Taisho, and Showa eras of Japan, while at the same time combining it with a steampunk aesthetic, which explains the many mechanical additions to the architecture in Fire Force. Okubo is just a master making these wacky worlds that only makes me wish they were real. Judging from some clips that I found on the internet, he's mainly a traditional artist, and most manga artists use Copic markers as their means for color illustrations. I looked around a bit and noticed that just like how he has many styles for his inked work, he also has many styles for his colored work. Sometimes he'll do very minimum rendering and just mainly do the flat tones with no shading, and usually he'll add a graphic component to his flat tones like some text or a design. And accompanied with his clean line work and sometimes lanky proportions, I can honestly imagine some of these pieces as stickers. They are that pleasing as graphic designs or logos. And later on during Fire Force's run, he would also add a grunge texture to his flat illustrations. He can also do very detailed rendering, and he usually reserves these for his more character-focused illustrations, but he also sticks in the background once in a while. Also, look at the way he renders some of the clothing in Soul Eater. Tell me this isn't some of the most coolest and unique ways to render the folds and fabric. I mentioned that his design could get very geometric, but he somehow extends this to his coloring as well. Obviously, folds aren't rendered like this naturally, but that goes back to when I said Okubo owns this style. He contorts proportions and renders fabric in a way that just complements his overall style. Although I am sort of upset that he doesn't use this rendering technique in Fire Force, probably due to it not really matching the overall art design. Personally, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Atsushi Okubo is one of the more unique artists that I've covered in my artist analysis series. His wonky designs that stretch the character's proportions and facial expressions separate him from a bunch of other manga artists. While at first he seemed to not be able to efficiently manipulate the character's proportions in the beginning of Soul Eater, he definitely made that the entire basis for his art style, and only got better as time went on. And that goes for his coloring styles as well. He has 2 art books dedicated to the work he's done for Soul Eater and its atrocious sequel. Oh, and by the way, if you guys didn't notice, I am not going to talk about Soul Eater or not. The literal definition of pointless. He does have a Twitter if you want to keep up with him, and you can always buy the manga volumes for Soul Eater and Fire Force and whatever else he's worked on if you want to support him. It does sadden me that he has stated that Fire Force is going to be his last work as a manga artist, since his work is really good, but I'll stick with him in Fire Force to see how it all ends. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, it's me, back again after the video. It's been about 3-ish weeks since my last analysis on Koyoharu Gotoge, and yes, I do know that these videos are sort of what's been getting my audience thus far, so I'll try to pump them out a bit faster. I feel that 3 weeks might be a bit too long for making an analysis video. I also see the requests I've been getting, so I do want to acknowledge that I do see them, but it will take me a while to get to them. Sometimes I haven't read any manga or have indulged myself in any of the material that the artist in question has done, so it's a bit harder for me to analyze that person's work. And usually it takes time for me to, read a good chunk of the person's work or indulge myself in the material, figure out what to write for them, write the script, find the material on the vast ocean known as the internet, or have to get in person. So until I'm able to do this, full time, I don't think I could dedicate huge amounts of time to dissect an artist that I have never heard of before. But don't worry, the day will come where I can live off of this. And until then, please bear with me. On that note, I've broken 400 subscribers, yay! One step at a time, just doing it one step at a time. I'm going to be doing some more art videos for a bit until my next artist analysis, so please look forward to that. Thank you for those who are watching, have been watching, and commenting from the very beginning, especially to those that are watching towards the end to hear all this. Again, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.